Dr. Adrian Cole had spent most of his life building the kind of success others dreamed about. He grew up believing that hard work could fix anything, and for many years that belief seemed true. His medical practice flourished, his investments multiplied, and his neighbors admired his discipline and calm confidence. People often assumed he lived without worry, but beneath his polished exterior lived a man slowly losing control of his own life. Long nights at the hospital drained him, and the pressure to maintain perfection created a quiet storm inside his mind. His marriage to Evelyn, once strong and full of affection, had faded into routine. They lived together like strangers who shared the same schedule, not the same dreams. Adrian convinced himself that this emptiness was permanent, a sign that he had already reached the peak of his life and was now only watching it fall apart in slow motion. Everything changed when Lila Hart walked into his clinic. She carried no wealth, no comfort, and no guarantee of tomorrow, yet she held a determination he had not seen in years. Adrian admired how she faced hardship without surrender, and that admiration quickly grew into an emotional escape. He began imagining a life where he could start over, free from the pressure he felt at home and the expectations of the community. Lila never encouraged these thoughts, never hinted at anything beyond a patient-doctor relationship, but Adrian's mind filled the gaps with fantasy. He convinced himself that happiness waited just beyond one difficult decision, one clean break from the life he believed was suffocating him. Instead of seeking help or acknowledging his stress, he let desperation guide him. He failed to see how distorted his thinking had become. In the darkness of his confusion, he made a choice that would end everything he had built. Believing he could remove every obstacle in one secret move, Adrian contacted someone he thought could solve his problems permanently. He never considered the moral weight, the consequences, or the destruction it would cause. He acted like a man trapped, unable to recognize that he had created the trap himself. When law enforcement revealed that they had been monitoring the man he contacted, Adrian realized too late how far he had fallen. The moment officers entered his clinic, the illusion of control vanished. The community he served for years watched in shock as the respected doctor became the center of a scandal that spread across the country. His reputation vanished overnight, and the life he had been trying to escape crumbled completely. In the quiet that followed, Adrian saw the truth he had ignored. The pressure he felt was not a prison but a signal that he needed help, balance, and honesty. His story became a powerful reminder that even the strongest people can break when they face life alone. It taught others that mistakes grow in silence, that emotional struggles should never be buried, and that one wrong choice can destroy years of effort. Adrian's downfall became a lesson about the importance of seeking support before reaching a breaking point, and about the danger of letting fantasy overshadow reality. After Adrian's arrest, the world he once controlled with precision slipped into a chaos he could no longer influence. Every headline painted him as a monster driven by greed and forbidden desire. Reporters crowded outside the courthouse each morning, hoping to capture a moment of guilt on his face. Inside the walls of his cell, the silence pressed against him like a weight he could not escape. He had spent years advising patients on managing stress, yet he had ignored his own crumbling mental state until it pushed him toward destruction. Now, stripped of status and comfort, he was left alone with the truth he had spent so long running from. His downfall became a daily reminder that success without emotional stability could collapse in an instant. Evelyn struggled under the sudden flood of attention. She had always been private, choosing quiet places and close friends, but now her life was dissected by strangers who searched for signs she had missed. She replayed countless memories, trying to find a moment when everything changed, a sign she could have stopped him from sliding into darkness. But the more she searched, the more she realized how deeply Adrian had hidden his struggles. He had carried the pressure of perfection until it crushed him, and she had unintentionally added to that pressure by expecting him to always be the strong one. Though she felt betrayed, she also saw the part she played in their distancing, and the guilt weighed heavily on her heart. Lila, whose presence had sparked Adrian's dangerous obsession, found herself trapped in a story she never asked to be part of. She had walked into the clinic seeking healing from her own setbacks, never imagining her determination would be misinterpreted as affection or interest. When she learned that Adrian had used her as the fantasy escape from his collapsing life, she felt overwhelmed by fear and disbelief. She feared people would accuse her of involvement, even though she had no connection to his choices. Despite her innocence, whispers spread through her small neighborhood, and she struggled to face the judgment of people who didn't know the truth. Still, she continued her daily routines, reminding herself that the only way to overcome chaos was to remain grounded. As the investigation unfolded, detectives pieced together the timeline of Adrian's actions. They noted how a respected professional could fall so quickly when he ignored his emotional breaking point. His case became a study for experts who examined the psychological unraveling that often hides behind outward success. Many wondered how a man who saved lives could plan to end one, and the answer pointed toward unchecked stress, isolation, and a dangerous belief that drastic actions could create easy solutions. His deterioration was not sudden, it was a slow erosion fueled by fear and false hope. In the weeks before the trial, Adrian began to understand the depth of the damage he caused. Losing his freedom hurt, but knowing he had shaken the lives of others, especially those who trusted him, created a pain even prison walls could not contain. He realized that the search for escape had led him into a darkness far worse than anything he had tried to avoid. His story, once a tragic scandal, slowly transformed into a reflection of how easily a person can lose their way when they hide their struggles instead of reaching out for help. The trial began under a cloud of tension that settled over the courthouse like a heavy fog. Crowds gathered early every morning, eager to see the man who once symbolized success reduced to a symbol of downfall. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere carried a strange mix of grief, disbelief, and curiosity. Adrian sat quietly, looking smaller than he ever had in his immaculate white coat. Without the protection of his profession or wealth, he appeared as a man wrestling with the weight of his own decisions. The prosecution laid out every detail of his plan, exposing the steps he took in the shadows and the moment he crossed the line from desperation into criminal intent. Each piece of evidence chipped away at whatever hope he tried to hold on to, reminding him that he had become someone unrecognizable even to himself. Evelyn attended the hearings only when absolutely required, sitting far from the front where her presence might draw attention. She listened as strangers in suits described the unraveling of her marriage in cold, factual terms. Hearing her life laid bare felt like standing in an open field during a storm with no shelter in sight. She watched Adrian closely, searching for any sign that the man she once loved still existed beneath the shame. Sometimes she thought she saw a flicker of remorse in his eyes, but other times she felt no connection to him at all. The trial forced her to confront her own pain, pushing her to rebuild her identity apart from the title of wife. She slowly realized that healing would require her to let go of the version of Adrian she once believed in. Meanwhile, Lila faced her own battle outside the courtroom. She had hoped the case would move forward quickly, but instead, reporters kept revisiting her name, weaving her into sensational stories that distorted her reality. She tried to distance herself by focusing on her health and rebuilding her quiet life, yet the shadow of the scandal followed her everywhere. Even simple errands felt overwhelming as she sensed curious eyes and half-hidden whispers. She reminded herself again and again that she was not responsible for Adrian's choices. Still, the unwanted attention tested her resilience in ways she had never imagined. She found strength in routine, reminding herself that moving forward did not require forgetting, only refusing to let fear rule her steps. As testimonies continued, experts described Adrian's psychological state before his arrest. They explained how emotional fatigue, suppressed stress, and an unhealthy fixation had distorted his judgment. Their analysis painted a portrait of a man who once stood on a solid foundation but allowed cracks to spread until the entire structure collapsed. Adrian listened with growing awareness, realizing how disconnected from reality he had become. Each expert's words served as a mirror, reflecting not just his actions but the internal chaos he had ignored for far too long. He began to understand that his tragic path had not been a sudden fall but a slow descent fueled by silence and denial. The closing arguments marked the trial's emotional peak. As both sides summarized their cases, Adrian felt the full weight of the life he destroyed. He knew the verdict would determine his future, but more importantly, he knew it would define how others remembered him. In that moment of stillness, he recognized that the path to redemption would not begin with freedom, but with acceptance, humility, and the courage to face the truth he had tried to escape. The verdict arrived on a warm afternoon that felt strangely calm compared to the storm that had led to this moment. The courtroom filled with tense silence as everyone waited for the final judgment. When the words were read, confirming Adrian's guilt, a wave of emotion rippled through the room. Some felt justice had been served, while others remained stunned that a man once celebrated for saving lives could fall so deeply into darkness. Adrian heard the decision with a numb stillness, as though he had already accepted his fate long before the sentence was spoken. The gavel's final strike echoed in his mind, marking the end of the life he once knew and the beginning of a stark new reality. After the sentencing, Adrian was transferred to a facility far from the city where he had built his reputation. The transition was jarring. The security gates, stark walls, and structured routines left no room for denial. The reality of confinement settled onto him like a heavy cloak. In these early weeks, he struggled with waves of regret that came without warning. He realized that everything he had once valued, respect, trust, purpose, had been shattered by a decision born from isolation and fear. Yet as painful as these realizations were, they forced him to confront the deeper issues he had avoided for years. For the first time, he acknowledged that he had lived with an unspoken pressure to appear perfect, never allowing himself to express vulnerability or seek support. Evelyn began slowly rebuilding the pieces of her life after the trial. The weight of public scrutiny lingered, but she learned to manage it with quiet strength. She sold the house she once shared with Adrian, believing it was the first step toward healing. Living in a smaller, private space helped her regain a sense of safety. She started practicing habits she had long neglected, focusing on her own emotional well-being instead of the expectations of others. Though she felt sorrow for the years lost to a marriage that had drifted apart, she also found gratitude in the chance to start anew. She discovered that moving forward did not mean forgetting the past, it meant accepting it with honesty and learning from it. Lila, too, found her life gradually returning to a gentle balance. As the trial faded from headlines, the whispers around her quieted. She resumed her routines with renewed purpose, determined not to let the scandal define her identity. The experience had taught her the importance of protecting her boundaries and acknowledging her worth, even when others tried to place labels on her. With time, she felt strong enough to continue her journey without constantly looking over her shoulder. Her resilience became a source of quiet inspiration for those who knew what she had endured. Inside the prison walls, Adrian began to change in ways he never expected. He attended counseling sessions, listened to others' stories, and slowly confronted the emotional wounds he had carried throughout his career. He realized that ambition without balance, responsibility without communication, and success without vulnerability created a fragile foundation. Though he could not undo the harm he caused, he committed himself to understanding why he had fallen so far. In the stillness of confinement, he began learning the lessons he had ignored during his years of outward achievement. For the first time, Adrian saw that growth often begins in the darkest places, where self-reflection becomes the only path forward. Years passed slowly, marked not by seasons or celebrations but by moments of quiet reflection within prison walls. Adrian used the time to look inward, peeling back the layers of ambition, pride, and unspoken fear that had shaped his past. The man who once measured his worth by achievements now measured it by accountability. He learned to accept responsibility without excuses and to sit with the discomfort of his choices rather than flee from them. Through counseling and daily introspection, he began to understand how emotional neglect, both toward himself and those around him, had pushed him toward ruin. He could not escape the consequences, but he could choose how to live with them. This realization sparked a slow but steady transformation, one built not on reputation or accomplishment but on honesty and humility. Adrian eventually found a quiet purpose within the facility. He started mentoring other inmates who faced their own struggles with guilt, addiction, or despair. Though he knew he could never position himself as a figure of guidance in the outside world again, he discovered that offering support inside brought a sense of meaning he had long been missing. He spoke about stress, isolation, and emotional collapse, not as an expert, but as someone who had suffered the fallout of ignoring his breaking point. These conversations became a form of service, not to erase his past but to prevent others from following the same destructive path. In helping them, he found a peace that had eluded him for most of his life. Beyond the prison walls, the people affected by his actions continued their own journeys. Evelyn rebuilt her life with quiet strength, finding comfort in routines that once felt insignificant. She pursued work that fulfilled her, surrounding herself with people who valued her resilience. Over time, she realized she no longer carried the weight of being defined by her former marriage. Instead, she felt grounded in her independence and grateful for the chance to grow without the shadow of Adrian's choices lingering over her. Her healing became a testament to the power of releasing what no longer served her and stepping into a future shaped by self-respect. Lila moved forward as well, choosing not to let the past determine her future. The ordeal had shaken her confidence, but it also taught her the importance of emotional boundaries and inner strength. She continued caring for her health, investing her energy in rebuilding a stable life. She found comfort in the knowledge that she had remained true to herself despite the chaos around her. With each passing year, she grew more certain that resilience was not born from ease but from surviving moments that threatened to break her. In the end, Adrian's story evolved from scandal to cautionary reflection. It served as a reminder that even the appearance of success cannot hide silent struggles, and that ignoring emotional turmoil can lead even the strongest minds into dangerous territory. His downfall, though devastating, became a lesson for others about the importance of vulnerability, communication, and self-awareness. While he could never undo the pain he caused, his willingness to confront the truth allowed him to change from within. His journey showed that redemption is not about erasing the past, but about choosing to grow beyond it, one honest step at a time.